Could you survive in the Wasteland and rule like Immortan Joe, a warlord who didn't just seize power, but built a godlike reputation on his control of the Citadel's life-giving aquifer? In a world where water is more valuable than gold, Joe's grip on the only fresh supply made him both savior and tyrant to thousands. His rise wasn't just about brute force, it was about strategy, resource management, and turning survival into a system that others depended on. Today, we'll uncover the real tactics Joe used to capture the Citadel, defend it from rivals, and build a fanatical following, right down to the science behind his infamous mask and the radiation-scarred war boys. But before any of that, imagine knowing the world you live in is about to collapse. What would you do to prepare? To understand how Immortan Joe built his empire, you have to start with the man he was before the world ended, Colonel Joe Moore. Long before the Wasteland, Joe fought in brutal pre-apocalypse battles over oil and water, conflicts explored in the Fury Road comics. These wars didn't just harden him as a soldier, they taught him how to pivot from military officer to survival strategist. The chaos of collapsing nations became his training ground. While most clung to the old ways, Joe learned to see opportunity in every disaster, reading the signs of collapse and preparing for what would come next. As society crumbled, he didn't hesitate. He began gathering supplies, water, fuel, weapons, while others were still in denial. But Joe knew that stockpiling alone wouldn't guarantee survival. He needed a defensible position, something that could serve as both fortress and symbol. That's when he set his sights on the Citadel. The Citadel wasn't just a lucky find. Joe recognized its potential. 3 massive rock towers rising from the desert, built over an underground aquifer. In a world where every drop of water mattered, this was the ultimate stronghold. Taking the Citadel was no accident. Drawing on tactics learned from real-world sieges, Joe orchestrated a lizard rope assault, using grappling hooks, ropes, and a coordinated attack to overwhelm the defenders, as depicted in the comics. This wasn't brute force, it was calculated, creative warfare, instantly elevating himself from survivor to ruler. With the Citadel under his control, Joe's vision expanded. He didn't just want to survive, he wanted to shape the new world. The Citadel's vertical structure suited his plans: resource production at the bottom, living quarters for skilled workers and loyalists above, and his own command center at the top. This hierarchy wasn't just practical, it reinforced the idea that Joe, and only Joe, controlled the flow of water and life itself. Every aspect of the Citadel's design made it easier to defend and harder for anyone to challenge his authority. But Joe's transformation didn't stop with military tactics or resource management. As time passed, his body began to show the scars of the Wasteland: radiation sickness, sores, and decay. Instead of hiding these weaknesses, Joe turned them into a display of power. He wore a custom respirator mask, a bellow-style breathing unit dusted with white powder, and armor crafted from car parts with military insignia. This created a terrifying, almost inhuman appearance that reminded everyone of both his war hero past and his new godlike status. Joe understood that physical power and resources weren't enough to hold an empire together. He used psychological tactics to secure loyalty. No longer just Colonel Joe Moore, he became Immortan Joe, a name that suggested immortality and divine right. He introduced the cult of V8, blending military indoctrination with religious fervor. His war boys, raised from birth to serve him, were promised eternal glory in a mechanical afterlife if they died for his cause. Joe's decrees became sacred law, and his image, half man, half machine, was worshipped as much as it was feared. Every decision Joe made reinforced his control. He recruited and organized people with essential skills: gardeners to keep hydroponic crops alive, mechanics to maintain vehicles, medics to patch up the wounded. Each person's role was defined by the needs of the Citadel, and every resource was accounted for. Joe's empire ran like a machine, with him at the center, deciding when and how the water would flow. This blend of military strategy, resource monopoly, and cult leadership made Joe's power unique in the Wasteland. While others scavenged and fought over scraps, Joe built a system that outlasted chaos. His rise wasn't just about survival, it was about creating order where none existed. But the real heart of Joe's rule, the thing that made it all possible, was the Citadel itself. Its unique geography, defenses, and resources set the stage for everything to follow. Understanding how Joe turned this fortress into the core of his empire is the key to understanding his dominance. The Citadel stands as a true fortress in the Wasteland. Its 3 stone mesas rising above the desert and guarding the last reliable aquifer for miles. Immortan Joe's control over this water source is what turns the Citadel into the region's most valuable stronghold. The aquifer runs deep beneath the rock, and its water is channeled up into storage tanks, feeding not just the Citadel's population, but also the beginnings of agriculture in a world where almost nothing grows. Joe's grip on the aquifer is more than practical. It's the basis for his entire power structure. Each of the Citadel's 3 towers plays a specific role in maintaining this power. At the top, Tower 1 is Joe's domain. Here, he commands from his headquarters, surrounded by his most trusted lieutenants. This tower also houses the hydroponic gardens and a sealed biodome, where Miss Giddy's library preserves books and instruments from before the fall, a rare collection of knowledge that gives Joe's regiment a cultural edge. The 5 wives, central to Joe's plans for a legacy, are kept here as well. Control of the water valves, the gardens, and the library all reinforce Joe's position at the apex. Tower 2 is home to the skilled workers, mechanics, engineers, and farmers, who keep the Citadel running. Their expertise is essential for maintaining the machinery that draws water, powers elevators, and keeps the fortress's systems operational. These workers live above the masses, but remain dependent on Joe for access to resources and protection. Their labor is the backbone of the Citadel's daily life, but their status is always tied to obedience. Tower 3 houses the wretched, the largest and most desperate group. They crowd the lower levels, surviving on whatever rations Joe allows. Most of their lives are spent waiting for water, which is distributed through a system of pipes that Joe controls directly. The mill rats, drawn from this underclass, power the central elevator by hand, literally lifting the rest of society above them. This arrangement makes the Citadel's social order visible and inescapable. Everyone knows their place, and every drop of water is a reminder of who holds the real power. The Citadel's defenses are more than just its height and stone. Joe and his followers have scavenged the wasteland for scrap, turning old metal into reinforced gates, weapons, and tools. Even the lowest members of society contribute, whether by hauling supplies, repairing pipes, or tending crops. Trade completes the loop that keeps the Citadel thriving. Joe traded fresh water and hydroponic produce to Gastown for gasoline and to the bullet farm for ammunition, completing his fortress's self-sustaining loop. Breast milk, harvested from captive women, also becomes a commodity. These exchanges allow the Citadel to acquire fuel, weapons, and other essentials. Joe's network ensures that even as the world outside decays, his fortress remains stocked and defended. But the Citadel's true genius lies in how it forces dependence. No one can eat, drink, or move without Joe's permission. The design of the fortress and the rationing of resources make rebellion almost impossible. His public water distributions are staged events, reinforcing his role as both provider and ruler. The system doesn't just keep people alive, it keeps them loyal, or at least too desperate to resist. Yet, physical control isn't the only thing holding the Citadel together. Joe's rule goes beyond water and walls. Why would anyone willingly race toward death for a leader who controls them? In the world of Immortan Joe, the answer is psychological mastery, an entire belief system called the Cult of V8, built to turn suffering into loyalty and worship. Joe fused the desperate need for meaning in a ruined world with the spectacle of automotive worship, creating a faith that promised his followers a mechanical Valhalla. For the war boys who grew up sick from radiation, malnourished, and with little hope, Joe's cult was more than a set of rules. It was a reason to live and to die. The cult of V8 worked because it offered the war boys a way out of hopelessness. Joe didn't just demand obedience, he provided a path to glory. From childhood, war boys were isolated from the rest of the Citadel, indoctrinated with rituals, chants, and the myth that Joe was a living god. Their bodies bore the marks of the Wasteland, cancerous tumors, pale skin, and the wasting diseases of radiation exposure. Joe didn't try to cure these ailments. Instead, he weaponized them. He taught the war boys that their sickness made them chosen, that their short lives could be redeemed through sacrifice. Suffering was no longer a curse. It was a badge of honor, proof that they were destined for something greater. Ritual was everywhere. The V8 engine became a sacred symbol, painted on foreheads and worshipped as the source of all power. The most vivid example comes from the "Witness Me" rite. Before a suicide attack in battle, a war boy would spray his mouth with chrome paint, shout the phrase, and hurl himself toward death. This wasn't random madness. It was the result of years of conditioning, where the promise of a chrome-plated afterlife in Valhalla was worthy of any price. Joe's system made death a victory, transforming every war boy into a weapon who saw self-destruction as the ultimate act of faith. Joe's own image was central to this psychological control. His failing health, sores, tumors, and respiratory problems could have exposed weakness. Instead, he used it to build a myth. He wore a breastplate covered in metals and a skull-like gas mask, its tusks modeled after horse teeth to mimic skeletal jaws and intimidate both followers and rivals. The mask hid his sickness and projected strength, making Joe appear more than human. To the war boys, he was not just their leader, but a divine figure who survived against all odds, proof that faith in the cult of V8 could overcome even the Wasteland's horrors. Every aspect of war boy life reinforced Joe's authority. Their loyalty was tested through constant rituals, maintaining vehicles as acts of worship, chanting Joe's name, and treating every battle as a sacred mission. Vehicles became altars, and sacrifice was the highest calling. Joe's speeches were not just commands, but sermons, filled with promises of immortality and reminders that service to him was the only way to escape a meaningless death. This cycle of ritual and reward kept the war boys locked in a state of devotion, unable to imagine a life outside Joe's system. The effects of Joe's psychological tactics weren't limited to the war boys. Even the wretched, living in poverty at the Citadel's base, saw him as the source of life and hope. Joe staged public appearances, dispensing water in carefully measured spectacles that reinforced his image as a benevolent savior. Every ritual, every costume detail, every speech was designed to maintain awe, dependence, and obedience. Joe didn't just control resources, he controlled identity and belief. The cost of this system fell hardest on Joe's followers. War boys, ravaged by illness and convinced their suffering had meaning, rushed toward death with no thought of survival. Joe had turned their pain into purpose, their mortality into a tool for his own power. In a world stripped of comfort and future, he offered a reason to sacrifice everything, and for many, that was enough. Yet for all his psychological mastery, Joe's own body was a reminder of the Wasteland's toll. His armor and mask projected power, but they also concealed decay. The question remains, how did Joe manage to keep ruling, even as his own health failed? The science behind Immortan Joe's survival is a study in adaptation and control, shaped by the relentless hazards of a fallout-scarred wasteland. Every aspect of his appearance and technology serves a purpose, both practical and psychological. Joe's body shows the symptoms of living in an environment poisoned by nuclear disaster. These aren't just signs of age or weakness, but a testament to the toxic world he rules. The environment has left its mark on everyone, but Joe's condition is always on display, a constant reminder of the stakes of survival. His mask and breathing apparatus are more than just props. they are essential for life. The mask, designed with intimidating horse-like teeth, is powered by a system of bellow-style air pumps. Costume designers modeled these after medieval bellows, creating a setup that both filters the air and amplifies Joe's presence. The bellows move with each breath. In the Wasteland's harsh air, filled with dust and lingering fallout, this system delivers the clean air his damaged lungs need. Joe doesn't hide this machinery. Instead, he uses it as part of his myth, turning every mechanical gasp into a symbol of endurance and authority. Joe's armor follows the same logic. It's a patchwork of bulletproof plexiglass, scavenged metal, and real military service metals, combined with mobile phone parts and bits of scrap. The metals hint at a past filled with victories, real or invented, while the rest of the armor conceals his deteriorating health. The chest plate is bulky, hiding the boils and frailty underneath, and the overall design projects an image of invincibility. The armor is both shield and costume, protecting him physically while reinforcing the story he tells his followers. Even the white powder dusted across his skin, inspired by Indian holy men, covers sores and pain, giving him a ghostly, almost supernatural appearance that the war boys eagerly imitate. Infertility is another consequence of the Wasteland's radiation. Healthy births have become rare, and most children show signs of mutation or illness. Joe's response is his infamous breeding program. He kidnapped women he believed were free from birth defects, subjecting them to testing in a twisted attempt to secure a full-life heir. The 5 wives are not just symbols of hope. They are assets in his plan to restore a bloodline untouched by the fallout. Joe's obsession with producing a healthy child is tied directly to his vision of power. He sees control over reproduction as vital as control over water or fuel. The Citadel's water system is a technological feat in itself. Joe's monopoly on the aquifer gives him unmatched leverage, but it also requires constant vigilance. Pumps, pipes, and storage tanks must operate in a world where corrosion, dust, and sabotage are constant threats. Joe relies on skilled workers to keep the system running. A single failure could mean disaster, not just for the thousands who depend on the Citadel for survival, but for the stability of Joe's entire regiment. The engineering behind the water supply is as much a weapon as any gun or armored car in his arsenal. Joe's survival is the result of deliberate choices. He turns every vulnerability into an asset. His respirator becomes a symbol, his armor a shield and a story, his breeding program a tool for legacy. But every layer of protection also underscores how fragile his position really is. If his empire hinges on technology and fear, and his frail body, what happens the day his respirator fails? Immortan Joe's empire thrived on control of water, fear, and belief. But this balance was always fragile. By exploiting desperation and constructing a false image of strength, he built a system that looked unbeatable, but was riddled with vulnerabilities. Remember how Imperator Furiosa smashed his regime by freeing the wives and cutting his respiratory lines? That single act exposed the limits of his power and brought down the Citadel from within. His rule relied on manipulation over genuine stability. Would you ration every drop of water? Or could you forge loyalty like a god in the desert? Share in the comments which part of Joe's empire, resource control, fortress design, or cult leadership you think will be the toughest to pull off in a world gone mad.